Do you think that flirting is cheating? Well, this is how it all started. My wife started showing a clear interest in a colleague, which made me feel uneasy. I don't consider myself to be a tyrant, and I've never mistreated my wife. However, when she told me that she'd invited me to her company's party, it made me think. This prompted me to look into it further, which ultimately led to the breakdown of my marriage. I was the youngest of 3 boys. I was the youngest of 3 boys in my family. My older brothers were like my father, and I guess I inherited some of his traits. Unfortunately, my father was abusive towards my mother, and that had a big impact on our whole family. I never saw him hit her, but there was always a lot of shouting and swearing. It made my mother very unhappy. My brothers were influenced by our father's behavior, and that made my life difficult. It was awful. I couldn't understand why my mother stayed with my father when he was being so abusive. Since I left for college, I've only had to deal with my father and brothers when it was absolutely necessary. I've made a point of distancing myself from people who hurt others, whether emotionally or physically. The other men in my family are the opposite. They seem to enjoy causing pain. I also volunteer as much as I can. That's how I met my partner. It made me realize I wanted to create a loving family of my own and to break the cycle of abuse. I'm dedicated to ensuring that my children grow up in a natural environment. In a funny twist of fate, I'm even Santa Claus. I prefer to keep this aspect of my life private, though. I'm aware of my appearance and the link with the jolly overweight Santa character, even though I'm quite reserved. I have a playful side that I don't show much of. Playing Santa at an event led me to meet my future wife. She was managing the children as one of Santa's helpers. I only knew her first name at the time, but she made a big impression on me. After the event, I tried to find her without telling her who I was. So, Santa, we were formally introduced, and although Louise was initially a bit reluctant, she agreed to go on a date when her friend suggested a double date. This gave me a chance to charm her while playing the part of a slightly wealthier person, and it was after another successful double date that our romance really began to flourish. We then started going on single dates, but Lise wasn't keen to rush into setting down roots. I was patient, though, and after 7 months, we decided to commit exclusively. A year later, we exchanged VEs, although we haven't started a family yet. By the age of 27, social gatherings were becoming a more regular topic of conversation. I was known for being serious and sticking to the rules, so I wasn't the first choice for party invites. Louise loved socializing, but I often found comfort in observing from the sidelines. After 5 years of marriage, she started dropping hints that I should accompany her to her work functions. I initially dismissed her suggestions and continued attending, but it was during this time that I started paying closer attention to her interactions. As the holiday season approached, I got in touch with the Santa supplier who had several gigs available. One particularly enticing opportunity was at the Four Seasons Hotel on a Saturday. I prefer upscale venues as they often result in our tips being better. I was excited to accept the assignment, and the coordinator sent over the details and duties, which included mingling with guests. I was willing to give it a shot. There was also another gig at a senior living center scheduled 5 hours before the hotel event, which I also agreed to do. After finalizing the arrangements, I found out that San's company, Sunrise Enterprises, was sponsoring her appearance at the hotel. It seemed odd that she hadn't mentioned the party, especially since it was just 2 weeks away. But I'd already agreed to play Santa, so I put my concerns aside. My Saturday night routine usually involved dining out and then going to a movie or play. I waited until the last possible moment to bring up the subject. It was Thursday night, the week of her party. "Louise, how about dinner and a movie? I've got a project to attend to tomorrow night, and I'll be at my company's holiday party on Saturday afternoon and evening." "I'm surprised you're missing it. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it to you, probably multiple times. I distinctly recall bringing it up last weekend. You never seem to listen to me. But honestly, your absence from the party isn't much of a loss." Oh well, it was a bit of a letdown. Louis was pretty disappointed too. So it was no surprise that she was really excited. She tried to act sad, but I made a mental note to keep an eye on her. They usually don't introduce Santa to the attendees, and this, as it turned out, the event was no exception. Despite my quiet and shy nature, I had already met nearly all of the management team at previous events. I have a sharp memory for faces and names, so it was no surprise that only a handful of attendees took notice of me, sensing a familiarity in the back of their minds. Eyes have a way of leaving subconscious impressions. Fortunately, no one said anything. I ended up revealing my identity when the owner, Liam Howard, greeted all of his employees and their families. There were children bouncing on their laps, some frightened, some in tears and others excited. The air was filled with anticipation as we waited for the opening gifts. I spotted Liam with Louise, but I couldn't hear their conversation. From what I could tell, Louise's body language suggested she'd tried to persuade me to come along, but Liam didn't seem very welcoming. When he looked away from Louise, I noticed her exchanging flirtatious glances with Robert Richardson, who was about 10 years older than us and had a wife and kids. That's what I recall. I guess Mrs. Richardson was busy at the summer barbecue tonight. I couldn't help but wonder if Robert was divorced or had found a way to be away from his wife for the evening. Louise's gestures, raising her eyebrows and smiling at him, made me feel uneasy. Every 50 minutes of work earned me a 10. I took a quick break after using the restroom and found myself in the shadows. The hotel had set up a dark mesh screen for Santa to hide behind. It was semi-transparent, allowing some visibility. It was transparent, so I could see them on the dance floor. Louis and Robert were swaying together to a slow song, with her head gently resting on his shoulder. My stomach churned as I watched Louise guiding Robert's hand to her side. It was a move I'd seen before, so I quickly grabbed my phone and took a few photos, then sent them to Louise. The most incriminating photo was sent to Louise, showing her loyalty. "Have a look at this photo. Someone sent it to me. You better show up and put this guy in his place." "Is that Robert Richardson?" Louise must have missed my message, or perhaps her phone was out of reach. I called the hotel and asked to speak to Liz Cooper, but there was no answer. I couldn't find a record with that name, so I tried Robert Richardson. I was transferred, but nobody answered. Since Robert had a room booked, I decided to forward the photo to Liam Howard. "Do you condone infidelity among your married staff at these events?" I wasn't even invited to them, mind you. It's quite peculiar that Robert has a room. "I think this table is reserved, Larry." I saw Liam sneak a look at his phone before turning his attention to the same couple I'd been watching. He then gestured towards the official photographer, and they had a quick exchange. After getting the photographer's nod, he went back to taking pictures. After a second slow dance, Lise and Robert shared a quick kiss before parting ways. It was no surprise to see them seated together, even though the seating plan on the name cards on each table indicated otherwise. I thought it was my cue to step in. I've always found it curious how some mothers flirt with Santa. What's the reasoning behind it? Do they believe I have a direct line to the big guy? Not that I mind. I appreciate the effort a woman makes to capture my attention, especially with a revealing neckline. I simply reciprocate with a smile and a wink. The kids were sharing their secrets. I noticed who's glancing at her phone. Her reaction was pretty funny. She pushed Robert away and scanned the room, trying to figure out who had taken that photo. Robert tried to comfort her, but she shot him down pretty firmly amidst all the chaos. I quickly snapped a photo of them, one looking left, the other right. "I'll send it to Louise right after my next break." Thankfully, my phone was on silent. Louise hurried to the hallway with her phone in hand as mine vibrated. I observed her pacing and holding her phone away from her ear, as if hoping I would answer her call. I chose to let it go to voicemail when the food lines opened for my 20-minute break. During my lunch break, I sent Louise the photo that seemed to show she was up to no good. I texted her, "Don't bother coming home." A few moments later, Liz checked her phone and looked upset as she typed. She replied, "It's not what you think. This is a complete misunderstanding." At the very least, I had interrupted her anticipated evening of happiness. However, I remained. I was skeptical that I had managed to uncover her affair before it even began. If Robert was separated or divorced, I couldn't help but wonder if Louise was the cause. But it was time to socialize with the guests. I felt more like a clown than Santa. It turned out people weren't adept at engaging in mature conversations with Santa. Robert nervously scanned the crowd, searching for the informant. Meanwhile, Louis kept her distance from everyone, and then made her way. Robert was at a loss as to which way to go when Howard approached him. After a brief exchange, Robert's spirits visibly drooped, and he made his way towards the exit. It was at this moment that Louis returned to the party area, wearing a wide smile. However, Howard quickly captured her attention, and witnessing that smile swiftly vanish was a sight to behold. The sheer expression of terror, and I could see panic on Louise's face, and my heart sank as I wiped away a tear. Louise gathered her belongings and left the gathering. This peculiar cycle had come full circle. I had developed feelings for Louise while assuming the role of Santa, but now I found myself repulsed by her actions. After spending time with the children, I took a break after dinner and found several voicemails and text messages from Louise. I replied, "I heard from someone that you and Robert were sent home. Did you stop by his hotel room again? Maybe you had some fun before and after the party." "Larry, it's not what you think. I didn't do any of that. I was feeling unwell, so I left. I went straight home, and that's where I am now, alone. When will you be home? I told you not to come home. It looks like I'll be getting a room for the night. You disgust me." "Louise, please, hear me say that. Come home. Let me explain so you understand. There's nothing to understand. You were wearing an outfit I'd never seen before, and he let him touch you. I bet you two had plans. No wonder you didn't want to go. There were his wife and children. They're getting divorced, so you're helping to destroy their home too. What a vile person you are, Louise." She phoned, but I couldn't pick up. Santa's break had ended after one final session. I usually use my tips to buy nice gifts for Louise. If she receives anything from me this year, I'm back in my regular attire now, so I'm not as impressive as I could be. I introduced myself to Liam Howard as Larry Cooper and shook his hand. I also told him that I'd sent Louise home. "We don't condone that behavior, but I'm curious, how did you obtain that photo?" "You're right, it doesn't matter. I'm glad you're addressing the issue. If we never cross paths again, just know that I appreciate you taking a stand. I hope you have a lovely holiday season." Liam gave me a big hug as I left. It must be tough being a father figure to a group of troublemakers. I turned off my phone and went to find a budget hotel by the highway. After a long, steamy shower, I felt emotionally and physically drained. I won't admit to shedding tears, but I did drift off to sleep. I set an alarm and woke up at my usual time. I wondered how my body managed that. I knew I had to head home sooner or later. If I had a choice, I'd prefer it to be later. When I powered on my phone, I saw the usual barrage of missed calls and texts from Louise. Instead of returning her call, I reached out to my Santa hotline to inquire if they needed any last-minute Santas. It turned out that the Santa scheduled for the children's eye was called to the hospital to cover for a colleague who'd been arrested for DUI on Saturday night. It was my first time at the hospital, and I'm not sure I'll ever turn down another opportunity like it. Despite the kids' illnesses, they were incredibly genuine, and their hugs radiated with optimism whenever a parent was present. Some of the nurses were excessively friendly, which was nice to see. I found it comforting that the woman I love had shattered my heart, and I craved some form of reassurance. McKenzie, a nurse of a similar age, accompanied me during the lunch break. We walked briskly side by side. "We can go to the nurses' lounge as long as you behave. I'll have no trouble distinguishing between the naughty and the nice. Or really, which category do I belong to?" "Definitely the nice," McKenzie replied with a smile. She was charmingly disarming. It was a good answer. "What would you say? Do you like to drink? Did you bring any food?" "I'm standing in for a sick Santa, so I didn't come prepared. Water will do." "The hospital covers your meal. Just let me know what you want, and it'll be here in 15 minutes or less." After Mackenzie placed my lunch order, she pulled up a chair nearby. I had removed my white gloves and red cap. "I can tell by your hands that you're likely around 27 years old. You have a ring tan. You're probably still married to Mrs. Claus. I apologize for taking so long to reply. I was feeling a bit closed off and sorry, but I didn't mean to upset you." "I don't apologize. It's my issue, not yours. I'm afraid there won't be any rings or tans for you. I find it hard to believe someone as attractive as you is still single, especially given how smooth you are." I chuckled. I focused on my studies and didn't want a relationship to interfere with my career. I've only been at nursing school for 19 months, but things are settling down now. So I might start looking for dates more actively. "Smile, you won't stay single for long," I said, prompting another of her lovely smiles. My food arrived, accompanied by an apple from Mackenzie. We continued chatting until my break ended. McKenzie stayed close, guiding me from room to room when it was time to leave. McKenzie waited for me to change and then accompanied me to my car. I hope we meet again, unless you want to share your real name, Larry Cooper, she said with a warm smile. I truly enjoyed spending time with you today, McKenzie. Your smile was just what I needed. I replied gratefully. You were amazing today, Larry. Children and animals have a knack for sensing goodness, and these kids really warmed up to you. Take care, sweetheart, McKenzie said as she turned and headed back to the hospital. As I settled into the driver's seat, I lingered there for a while, starting my car. I felt certain about my future with those kids, reaffirming my path. When I got home, I saw 2 more cars in front of my house. I realized I hadn't checked my phone since I'd gone to the hospital to wait for the garage door to open. Louis was pulling back the curtain in the front room. She was with her mother, who gave me a disapproving look. They didn't seem very happy to see me. My mother said, "Well, look who decided to show up." My mother-in-law was in town and she was pretty hostile. I decided to ignore her. I was really worried about you, Louis said. He seemed concerned and gave me some evidence that the little boy had to go and hide. My brother-in-law and my father-in-law were there too. Larry approached the situation with some semblance of civility. Would you care to explain why he disappeared? Larry looked directly at Louise. In-law said, I refuse to believe it. My father and Lord interjected, Nevertheless, you're all present, so there's no way of misinterpreting this. I'm filing for divorce from Louise. Larry, please don't. Liz pleaded, raising my hand, and I interjected, Allow me to explain. I've always dreamed of having children, but I've come to the conclusion that it's too risky to have them with Louise. She grew up amidst abuse and disrespect, and her actions last night revealed her true nature. I refuse to become a part of that. When Louise tried to hug me, I put the kitchen table between us and carried on talking. Just a month ago, on our 5th anniversary, we were discussing starting a family. Now I find out she has a boyfriend. Did you tell them that the company owner took you home from the party because of your behavior? Louise, I asked, my voice cutting through. The room fell silent. I doubt it. I was curious if Robert Richardson would still have a job by Monday. I was looking at him, wondering if he was going through a divorce and dating Louise. Then again, maybe he made up the divorce story just to get Lise into bed with him. He's not my boyfriend. We've never been intimate. Liz spoke up quickly. If you didn't want anyone to know, why did you ask him to touch your body? Lise left the room quickly, leaving behind a tense atmosphere. I want a family, but I wouldn't risk their future with someone like Deese. Therapy won't change that. As I headed towards my bedroom, I could hear heated arguments in hushed tones echoing from a living room. The bathroom door was shut, indicating that's where she'd gone. 10 minutes later, I was backing out of the garage. On Wednesday, Louise received divorce papers while at Sunrise Enterprises. I learned this from several disgruntled soon-to-be exes. Some relatives found this way of contacting me inappropriate, though I didn't see why. When Louise called later that evening, I decided to be civil. Hello, I said in my most monotone voice. It's me, she replied. I know what you want. You never gave me a chance to explain what you think you saw in that picture, I said. Context. We must have been in the middle of the spin move or something, and that picture leads to a very inaccurate conclusion. She explained, my mistake. Just so you know, I didn't share the video that was also sent. I retorted, the sole image replaying incessantly in my mind was the video. My thoughts were incoherent that night. A video is just as easy to take as a photo. Larry, please, it was just some light-hearted fun on the dance floor. That's all, she pleaded. And as making things up makes things worse, it's like saying a horse with a broken leg is fine. I responded. My tone was firm and to the point. You've ruined our future. I won't embark on the journey of raising children only for you to. I'm leaving with a demand for alimony and child support. Our relationship is over. Give me a chance and you'll be glad you did. You couldn't stay loyal for 6 years, so why should I trust that you'll change just because you've had an epiphany? I'm sorry, but it's time for me to move on. Call me superficial or a quitter, but the most fitting term is CO I departed. I'll contest the divorce. Larry, well done. Hopefully you'll come to your senses before tying the knot again. My part in this is if Louise followed through with her threat to contest the divorce, It would only result in unnecessary expenses for everyone involved. While the news of Louisa's demotion didn't offer any consolation, it did bring a smile to my face knowing that my projected alimony would increase slightly. I was curious about Sunrise Enterprises and asked about Robert Richardson, even though I really wanted to hear that he was no longer with the company. I was told that he was away from the office for a few days. Well, Christmas was just a few weeks away, and all the slots for Santa visits to hospitals were already filled. I volunteered as a backup for any available slots. It seemed like fate was on my side. On Sunday afternoon before Christmas, I played Santa at a different hospital. My lean turned out to be a rather surly man, but I still enjoyed interacting with the children and their families. After the day ended, I felt even more determined to start my own family, despite being in the early stages of divorce. I created profiles on multiple dating sites, which were, people use dating sites for all sorts of things, from politics to religion and everything in between. As I started to get messages, I noticed a few people who were interested in chatting online. However, I suddenly felt a bit hesitant. My more conservative instincts made me feel a bit apprehensive. I ended up putting the dating sites on the back burner for now. I kept the divorce papers in a folder as I tried to work through my uncertainties. Louise didn't contest the divorce, but it dragged on until spring. I formed some female friendships, but I was hesitant to venture into the dating scene. The few attempts I made ended in disaster. Recovering from a failed marriage takes time. Oddly enough, I found solace in knowing others like me were also seeking love. I responded to emails and exchanged messages with people who were looking for love too. White lies helped pass the lonely nights. I didn't tell anyone at work about my divorce until I went to the summer company event alone. Then the rumor mill started. Why is it always assumed that husbands cheat? I read a study on cheating demographics that said it's nearly equal until age 50. After that, men tend to stray more frequently, often citing ego-boosting reasons. In my case, it was true. I managed to go on a few dates in late August. I was waiting in line at the cafeteria when a maintenance worker's ladder fell on me. I don't know why he was on that ladder during peak hours. What concerned me was the ugly, bloody gash in my ankle. A colleague drove me to the emergency room at Good Sam. I was sitting in my secluded corner behind the curtains. I thought I recognized a voice as the rustle of the curtains. I heard Larry McKenzie's voice saying, "Well, look who's here." "It's you, Santa-to-be, Tumble her reindeer, giving you a hard time." I was pushed to leave and take a higher-paying job with better benefits. "What's the story behind that cut? It looks like it needs stitches. I noticed your wedding rings are missing." I replied, "Divorced since April. Still no rings, huh? Do you take them off for work? Maybe I should invite you to dinner and you can fill me in." McKenzie suggested, "Maybe you should. When was your last tetanus shot?" "Let me think. I've no idea. I'll inform the doctor. Where are you taking me to?" "Infinity and beyond." I joked, "I'm being taken to see a physician. I came over to see what was going on." "Mr. Cooper, I got jabbed by a ladder. Just a bit of bleeding. I told the nurse Mackenzie's been keeping me engaged to help with the pain." "Great work, nurse." I added, "There's no trouble at all. He can't remember when he had his last tetanus shot. Let's give him a particularly uncomfortable one so he remembers next time," the nurse replied, addressing the doctor. "I presume. You know each other," the doctor said. "We met last Christmas when he was playing Santa. That explains why Mackenzie, who is usually quiet and reserved, isn't. The hospital probably wouldn't approve of us giving him a painful DTP shot. Let's stick to the usual procedure. Go ahead and clean the wound and give him the shot. I'll be back shortly with my sewing kit." Once the doctor had gone, Mackenzie gave me the injection while also cleaning my wound. She then asked me where we were going and when. I joked that we should skip that and meet at Tony's pub instead. 20. "They serve great pickles," Mackenzie said. "Are you leaving me to drive myself there?" I asked. "Well, I didn't have your phone number or address, so it's a date," she replied, her smile softening my guard. When the doctor returned, I got a few stitches within 15 minutes. Mackenzie's last words carried a playful grin. "Don't keep me waiting, or your worst competition fears might just come true." I teased, "I'll be at Tony's pub at 7 p.m. I was feeling pretty excited, like I hadn't been since my breakup. My heart was racing when I saw Mackenzie walk in. even though a guy was holding the door for her. She waved him off and looked around. She'd dressed to impress, and her smile was like a balm for my nervous heart. "It's a busy place," I said. "I told you I wanted to show you off. It didn't take long for someone to catch your eye, but I suppose you were used to that. What can I get you to drink?" "White wine," McKenzie replied, observing the surroundings. "You've been here a while, judging by the peanut shells." "Yeah, I couldn't afford to be late, or so I was told." McKenzie laughed. "The noise level was just right, so we had a nice chat over dinner and drinks when we got tired of sitting. I suggested a movie or dancing, but that wasn't really my thing. I'd rather get to know you better and learn about your past. There's a quiet little coffee shop near my place. I'll text you the address." "You know the address? What's your number?" McKenzie suggested after we'd shared a few kisses outside the restaurant. I checked the location of the coffee shop on maps and found it easily. McKenzie arrived just before me, so she knows the best parking spots. We spent another delightful 2 hours together. Despite being 10 years apart in age, we managed to spend 5 hours together. McKenzie is 5 years younger than me. She wants to have kids and have a career too, but she knows it's important to focus on raising kids when they're young. She was a bit reserved at first, but once she opened up, she showed a great sense of humor. I was glad she didn't ask about my past marriage when we first met. We talked about it later, after a couple of dates on Saturdays and 2 weeks apart. On Wednesdays and Saturdays, she asked about my previous marriage. "Larry, you have feelings for me, and I think you know I have feelings for you. Before we get too serious, I need to understand what happened in your previous marriage. McKenzie, I care about you, but I'm going to tell you what I think happened. You can ask anyone involved if this is right. You're probably one of the few who knows. I play Santa Claus, even my ex-wife. My wife didn't know about it, and still doesn't. Last December, I took a job at the Four Seasons Hotel, unaware that it was from my ex. Despite waiting, I hadn't received an invitation. I only found out about the party on Thursday, a week before it was due to take place. I decided not to go, which raised a few eyebrows. While I was dressed as Santa, I saw her. While I was on my break, I saw a salesman who had a room at the hotel dancing with a woman on the dance floor. They were really close, and he even touched her inappropriately. I managed to take a photo, but I wish I had recorded it. I confronted her with the evidence, and things quickly got intense. She's a deceitful woman. The day after I met you at the Children's Hospital event, something clicked. Being around those kids reignited my desire to have kids. Deep down, I realized I couldn't trust the future of my kids to someone like her. So, I made the decision to file for divorce. I told McKenzie, who seemed taken aback. Was it a snap decision? No counseling, just a sudden departure. McKenzie pressed, "That's right." I confirmed. "Raising children is a commitment that spans. Over 20 years, she couldn't even last 5 minutes," he replied. "But you didn't have any evidence of infidelity," McKenzie pointed out. "I may not have had concrete proof of physical cheating, but I witnessed her betrayal several times. She initiated physical contact while dancing, which clearly excited her, and the intimacy that followed was always intense. I gleaned all I needed to know. She forfeited the chance to be a parent to my children. Sometimes convictions are deeply ingrained beliefs that we must stand up for. I took what I deemed to be the appropriate action." I explained. I could see that McKenzie was feeling a range of emotions after our conversation that evening. I wasn't sure if she was interested in going out with me again, but a few days later I decided to give it another try. When I reached out to McKenzie, she was. Her demeanor was completely unchanged. We'd had to wait quite a while until we fulfilled our promise of exclusivity after dinner and a stroll through the park. McKenzie guided me back to her apartment. She always wore jeans or skirts with knee-high boots, and her sweaters are buttoned. When she danced for me, her blouses showed no trace of cleavage. I couldn't help but salivate. My performance for McKenzie wasn't as impressive as I'd hoped. After an extended session of dancing and kissing, I gave it my best shot. We shared an intimacy that had been absent from my life for quite some time. Since that evening, physical closeness in bed has become a fundamental aspect of every date. With the holiday season nearing, I asked McKenzie any plans she had for Saturday. "Well, I'm on the 5. I'm free from 10 p.m. M to midnight shift. What do you have in mind?" "How about helping out as Santa's cute little helper? I think I volunteered to be Santa at your old workplace. I need to be there by 9:20 a.m. The kids might not realize how good you look in your helper outfit, but I certainly will. I suggested teasingly. You're such a pervert. Let's hope those kids can't read minds or they'll be really confused. McKenzie chuckled. So McKenzie joined me at the children's center, and we made a great team. I relished the opportunity to bring joy to those kids as we departed dressed in civilian attire. McKenzie whispered to me, "You know, if someone were to inquire, I'd be open to entering at 25. I know it's a long-term commitment, even longer than a year. What if I decide you're not the right person for the job? I'm not worried about that." I spoke with Liam Howard, and he basically said, "You were right. You showed real courage in standing by your beliefs and your value of loyalty above all, just as strongly as you did in working with McKenzie." I grabbed both of her hands and knelt down on one knee. "McKenzie, will you marry me?" "I would be delighted, sir." "You guessed the ring size right. Well done." A few days later, I proposed again with a real ring. It felt like we were in a holiday competition narrative. Everything fell into place perfectly. We had a blissful time after that, with 2 children. Our firstborn was a lovely girl, who we named McKenzie Jr. She was later joined by another daughter, who we gave a traditional name. We joked that it wasn't Larry Jr., as our family continued to grow and thrive. McKenzie and I found ourselves at the forefront of a new adventure, inspired by our shared passion for bringing joy to others. We decided to open a children's charity together, using McKenzie's organizational skills and my experience as Santa. We created a magical space where children from all walks of life could experience joy, hope, and love. Our charity quickly gained recognition and donations poured in from generous individuals and organizations. Years passed and our charity expanded beyond our wildest dreams. We traveled the world spreading happiness to children in need, and our own kids grew up knowing the true value of kindness and compassion. One day, as we celebrated the anniversary of our charity with friends, family, and the kids we'd helped, McKenzie took my hand and whispered, "This is our greatest adventure yet." As we looked out at the smiling faces before us, I knew that our journey was far from over. Together, McKenzie and I would continue to make a difference in the lives of children everywhere, spreading joy and hope wherever we went. Please post a comment below to let us know how you liked this story.